Let's go ahead and go over our agenda for today's webinar with our introductions out of the way. So today we'll start with some SDK basics, like how it actually works, when you can use it as an integration option, platform availability. Then we'll cover the fundamental SDK features, like the Applanga settings file and the Applanga draft mode. Once we get through the features, we'll discuss some common considerations around using one of the SDKs. We'll walk through some concerns people typically have and how the SDK actually addresses those concerns. Last but not least, today I'm actually going to take you through a demo of the Android SDK. You'll see where to find the settings file, how the source text upload works, as well as how the automatic screenshot capture works. Now, as Christian said, we do have quite a bit of content to cover today. So as we progress through the webinar, please be sure to add your questions to the chat. We've reserved the last 10 minutes or so, and Christian and I can address them at the end of the webinar. If you miss anything due to an urgent call or email, maybe you're working from home and you've got kids or pets in the background, absolutely no worries. This webinar session is being recorded. And then after this call, later this afternoon, I'll actually send out a link to the recording, and I'll also send links to some helpful and more relevant documentation. So that brings us to the basics of the SDK integration. The Applanga SDKs can be used to translate native static app content into multiple languages. It's one of our many integration options that allows you to synchronize your content with an Applanga project for the whole translation process from end to end. Not only can the SDKs be used to upload source text to a project, it can also be used to upload any already existing translations plus screenshots of an app. You can upload those screenshots either from within the app via the draft mode menu, or you can upload them by extending already existing automated UI test scripts. The Applanga SDKs are also used to pull the latest translations into an app upon app start in what we call over-the-air updates. Even better, the SDKs sit on top of the app's development framework, preventing implementation headaches or any custom development work upfront. So who can actually use one of the SDKs? As long as an app is localizable, following the developer guidelines of the underlying framework, like for iOS or for Android, no additional development is required to integrate Applanga into an already existing app. A little more generally, a localizable app has gone through the process of internationalization. That's a bit of a mouthful, but the biggest part of the internationalization process is making sure that strings are not hard-coded into the app. What we mean by that is that the code and app strings don't live at the same place, or they don't reside at the same level. All strings in scope must be externalized in dedicated string files, like, for example, XML for Android or string files for iOS. If users are interested in using one of the SDK integrations, the Applanga SDK is available for iOS or Android. We have one for Flutter, React Native, Xamarin, and Unity as well. You can also customize your integration options. So some developers will actually combine options to best support both their development and their localization needs. For example, some will actually push content to the dashboard via a CLI integration, but then they'll actually use the Android SDK to pull translations, test draft translations using the Applanga draft mode, and they'll also use the over-the-air updates to ensure only the latest and greatest translations are available to app users. It really just depends on what teams need to accomplish their overall localization and translation workflow goals. So now that you know the basics of the SDK, let's go over some of those features that make the SDK so helpful in the overall app localization process. So the first big feature is going to be the automatic string uploads. So while in debug mode or with the draft mode activated, Applanga automatically pushes any brand new and not previously uploaded strings into the integrated Applanga project. This helps prevent teams from accidentally omitting any translatable content from their localization workflows, and it happens with workflow steps that developers perform anyways, running debug mode. Additionally, automatic string uploads won't actually overwrite original content if or when a string is changed at the code level. This helps our users maintain a source of truth for all strings and translations on Applanga. However, if a developer does need to overwrite the content for a project with the local version of the app, the content must be cleared from the dashboard first, then strings are re-uploaded or manually overwritten on the dashboard. All these changes to the translations are tracked via the changelog. And the changelog includes when the change happened and who actually made those changes. One very important note I like to make here is that the Applanga platform will never autonomously push translations to an app. Translations can only be published by specific Applanga users with specific user roles via the project's dashboard. So the next big feature is the Applanga settings file. The settings file acts like a repository for all the translations in an Applanga project, and it actually maintains a connection between an app and said project. It removes the need to add an API key directly to an app's code as part of the overall SDK integration. And even though the settings file may increase the size of an app, one settings file is significantly smaller than multiple string files for multiple languages, which you would need to include in the app if no Applanga SDK integration actually existed. The settings file should be updated with each release, and we also provide scripts to automate that as part of the integration. While it will hold the translations from the time the file was generated, we also have a feature that will cover any translation changes between releases. So that actually brings us to the over-the-air updates. So while the settings file may be from an earlier version of translations, the SDKs enable over-the-air or OTA updates to keep all translations current and up to date. On App Start, the SDK will send the translation version found locally, as well as the device language to the Applanga servers. If the translation for the requested language was updated on the Applanga dashboard and the translation version is higher on the server, the SDK will download all changes made between its local version and the one that exists on the server, generating what we call Delta updates. The Delta updates make sure that the SDK doesn't have to download previously downloaded translations. Oops. Sorry about that. Where was I? So Delta updates ensure that the SDK doesn't have to re-download previously downloaded translations again, and it keeps the overall response size to a minimum. These downloaded updates are then cached in the app. They're available even when the app is offline, and they won't be downloaded again the next time the app starts since they've been cached. Right. So, while we're talking about getting translations to your app via the SDK, let's go over the Applanga draft mode. So the draft mode enables some of our most helpful features for translation preview and testing. It allows Applanga users to start on-device testing with draft translations. It also allows users to create JIRA tickets for either translation or functional issues using said draft mode menu. And it also provides another way to capture and upload screenshots to the integrated Applanga project. Draft mode is especially helpful so you can see translations live and in context before actually publishing to your user base. The draft mode menu is relatively easy to access if you know how to find it. So it's not necessarily something that your customers will easily stumble upon. It's opened by a four-finger long hold, and you can only log in if you have the draft mode key, which is found in the project details in the actual Applanga project. Um, Now, if you're worried about any of these features not fitting into your workflow, it's not a problem. Um, the SDK features that we've been talking about are totally up to you and your team. Many of them can be disabled, including draft mode, in case you don't want your customers to accidentally stumble upon it, automatic string uploads, or OTA updates if you have very regimented review processes for translations. Obviously, the settings file is not one that you can disable, but almost everything else is. This allows users to really customize the integration so it works best for your ideal translation and localization workflows. Okay. Um, so now that we've covered the basics and features, I can imagine you may have some concerns about the Applanga SDKs. Um, with seemingly continuous updates that come with some of the SDK features, you may be worried about an impact to your overall app performance. That being said, there is no performance impact of Applanga. The main thing to keep in mind here is that translations aren't updated while the user is actually navigating the app. By default, translations are only updated upon app start. So to trigger those updates, an app user must either completely kill and restart the app, or the app goes into the background. To further explain what I mean, translation updates only happen during the startup phase, um, showing the splash screen, but not while the app is actually actively running. There is a minimal time frame for updates because the SDK is only updating the translation changes or delta updates, not all of the translated text. These quick delta updates happen because of the CDN infrastructure used by Applanga. These servers are located all around the world so they can be close to your users. They're highly available and designed for throughput, even for millions of concurrent or simultaneous requests. This ensures your app users see no impact on the app's performance while the SDK is retrieving those Delta updates. This workflow was specifically built to make the request as fast as possible to ensure that you get those up-to-date translations for any of your app's users, no matter where they're located. All that being said, Applanga is not a content management system or a CMS. That's because the app doesn't have to always be online to access the different locales. These translated strings are always available via the settings file locally. And again, we're only pulling Delta updates, so only the strings that have changed will be updated and cached. On app start, the Delta updates previously downloaded are also cached for subsequent use of the app. So while we're still on the topic of considerations, I also want to cover device languages and the Applanga fallback logic. The device language, as specified in the device settings by the user, is used by the Applanga SDK to determine which language an app should be served, and it's also used for requesting those Delta updates we've been talking about. If you prefer, Applanga can also be integrated with an in-app language selector that would overwrite those device settings for use in the app specifically. So if only some strings of an app are available in the specified language, then those strings will appear translated, while the remainder of the app will appear in the base language. So it goes from dialect to language to base language. For example, a device settings indicates French Canadian, and then if that's not available, the app will fall back to the language. So in this case, French. Now, if French isn't available, then it will fall all the way back to the base language, which is oftentimes English. Before we move on, I do want to point out that the fallback language does not work in the reverse order. What I mean by that is if an app is only available in a dialect, but not in the parent language, then the app will appear in the base language only. So using this example, again, if an app is available in French Canada, but a user's device settings point to French, then the app will appear in the base language, in this case, again, English. Nice. So with the basics, features, and considerations covered, now it's time to move on to the actual Android SDK demo. I will be walking you through our basic use case demo using Android Studio and Android Emulator. I do want to point out that these are not from Applanga. This is something that comes from Android themselves, both the Studio and the Emulator. So this will actually show you how the process works, like how to download the Applanga settings file and add it to the app, how the upload of source content works, as well as screenshot upload, and of course, a little quick peek at the draft menu. Right. So in this case, I'm actually going to show you a recording that I took earlier. I am not an Android developer, so the recording should be a little bit smoother to be able to walk you through without you guys getting confused, since again, I am not a developer. All right. So, uh-oh, looks like I didn't restart it. Okay. Let's see. This is the right video. Perfect. Okay. Alrighty. So first we have what it's like when you're getting started from the very beginning. On this page, I created a new Applanga project specifically for this Android app. I've given it a name, I selected my base language of English, and I assigned the project to the correct team. In this case, it's a team I'm an owner of. From here, I'll actually create my new project, and then we'll move into the integration dialog. There we go. All right, so from this page, I can select any of the integrations that fit my use case. And obviously for this webinar, I'm going to go with Android. I see some basic prereqs for getting started. For Android, the strings must be in a string resource XML file in the res/values folder. To have dynamic text localized, you also have to use get string in the source code. At runtime, my text will be automatically synced with the Applanga project dashboard. Then below the prereqs is the installation instructions, which really just takes you to the Android integration documentation. Then last but not least, you're also able to download the Applanga settings file from here for this particular project. Now, if you already have a project started for your Android integration, no worries. I'll show you where you can get this settings file once we get into the project. So after downloading the settings files, I clicked Start Upload. There we go. And that will take us to the next page, which is the automatic upload instructions. This gives you the basics on kicking off the string upload after you've gone through the SDK integration steps as outlined in the SDK integration doc, which we saw a link to on the previous page. You could also take a look at the draft mode instructions, but I'll walk you through some of that a little later. So first thing we'll need to do is we'll need to start our app while connected to the debugger. We'll run the build after we've gone through all the integration steps, and we'll keep an eye out for a log message that says Applanga successfully initialized. Once we've done that, we'll wait for another log message, Applanga uploaded missing translations. Depending on the number of string IDs in your the number of string IDs in your project, this could take a little while until you actually see the log message of uploaded missing translations. Last but not least, once we see those two log messages, we'll actually navigate back to the Applanga project and we'll check for our strings in the Applanga dashboard. If you add new strings to your project in the future, they'll also be uploaded each time you start the debugger. All right, so now I'm in my dashboard, and if you need to find these instructions again, you can click Start Integration here and walk through those steps again. Now, if you already created a project, you can download the settings file by clicking the Prepare Release button. All right. So with our project ready, then we're actually going to switch to Android Studio. So this is actually, I'm about to switch to Android Studio. There we go. So this is actually a demo Android app built by Applanga specifically for demo purposes. You can actually find it on GitHub if you'd like to see how it works. It's especially useful when you want to get a feel for how the SDK works and its capabilities. There's also one for iOS. Right. So first things first, I'm going to drop the settings file into the correct folder, and then I'll actually get to debugging. So here I am dropping in my settings file. And then we'll get into debugging. We'll give it a second and wait till we see the updated missing translations log. All right. Let's actually speed this up a little bit so you guys can see what happens. So once we get to debug, and there you go. We see our updated missing translations log message there. So now that I've seen that, I can actually switch back to the Applanga project where I'll check for the updated strings or uploaded strings, excuse me. So let me navigate back real quick. I refresh the page, and then I'll go into my base language of English. And there are all my uploaded strings. We've got exactly 70 strings uploaded from that weather app. And so now that I have my strings, I can actually go ahead and add the different languages for translations. So in this case, I added both French and German, if I remember correctly. And once those are added, I can actually place an order for translations. So with the translation process, obviously there's a little bit of time that goes between placing the order and actually getting those translations back. Obviously we're not going to sit through that. So I do have a second video that will pick us up once a translation order has been delivered back. All right. So that's it for video number 1. And now let's grab video number 2. All right. Oh, again, forgot to start these back over. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so in this case, I have translations ready in both languages, French and also German. If I click into these languages, I can actually see the translations. So in French, I believe I have mostly draft translations. And then if I switch to German, I will see that I have mostly target translations, or I believe it's all target. Right. So now that I have these translations, I can actually switch back to Android Studio again to run through the screenshot upload process. So first I had to navigate to and then start running those UI tests that we extended to include that screenshot upload, right? So let me get in there, and I'm actually just going to pause and speed it along a little bit. Okay, and now we see that we're uploading our screens as part of these UI tests. Okay, looks like our tests are complete, and I believe at this point I switched back to the project. All right, so I refreshed again, and then I'm actually going to go into those languages. In this case, I believe I uploaded screenshots to all 3. So now I see my English screenshots. If I switch from the all strings to the per screen mode, I can actually navigate through all of the screens. And with this per screen mode, I'm only seeing the strings that are on each screenshot, not all the strings. This is a little helpful for the review process. Now, if I switch into German, I can see all of the German translations on my screenshots. And you can also see in the screen thumbnails to the side as well. Right? Again, I can navigate through those. And then I can also switch to French and check the French screenshots as well. So we'll give it a second, and there we go. Now, if I needed to, I could click this little screens icon right here, and I could drag the screenshots into the correct order so that when reviewers are working in Applanga, they could actually see how the app would look as a user progresses through the app. So you could drag them into the correct order in the sequential order. All right. So that is it for the screenshot upload. And last but not least, I'm going to take you through the draft mode menu real quick. Right. So this is my last video. Again, we'll rewind this and we'll start from the beginning. Okay. So from here, I'm still in my project, but I can actually switch now to Android Studio, where I'll be using Android Emulator. Now, I can use the draft mode menu on Android Emulator, but you can also use it on a mobile device. I do need to grab the draft mode key, as you just saw, and this can be found in the project details of each project. So on mobile device, it's a 4-finger long hold, but since I'm using Emulator, I just clicked and held for about 5 seconds. So now I'm going to enter in my draft mode key. Then I'll click OK. And now to open the draft mode in Emulator, I just used, I pressed down on both sides of the mouse for a couple of seconds and pulled down, right? So with this, I can capture screenshots. I can use a previously created tag, or I can enter a custom tag. I think for this one, I use like testing upload. And once I have my tag, I can actually capture the screen, right? And now we know we have a screenshot upload with the tag of testing upload. You can also create JIRA issues here for either translation or functional issues, and that will also grab a screenshot and attach it to the JIRA ticket. So now I'm going to navigate back to my project. I'm going to hop back into French, and I'm going to click that screens icon, and then I'm going to click testing upload. That's that screenshot I just uploaded. And again, we see that the strings that are on the screen are associated with the right screenshot, and that'll just help us in review, right? This is another way that you can upload screenshots to Applanga in the event that you don't want to use your UI test for uploading screenshots, right? Okay, and that's all I have for that. So let me switch back to my PowerPoint. Right. And before we get into questions, I just want to point out one more time that the emulator is not something from Applanga. That is something from Android Studio. But you can use the draft mode menu on an actual mobile device. You can use it an emulator or the mobile device. And it's very helpful in on-device testing, again, for identifying any functional or translational issues or testing out those draft translations. Okay. So now that we've covered everything on the agenda for today, I know that was a lot of content in this webinar. So now I'll go ahead and I'll open the virtual floor for questions. I think I may have seen a couple come in through the chat. So I will pass it over to Christian now.
Yes, thank you very much, Aisha, and thank you everyone for taking time and for the questions that you sent to me through the chat. I had one around what is the software development kit in general, or what an SDK is in the chat. Maybe everyone saw that. That's what goes out to everyone. So SDK stands for Software Development Kit. Basically, just means like a whole set of pre-compiled tools, pre-compiled pieces of software that are put together and then packaged so that they can be used as such. So kind of like a connector or something that you might know from other tools, like a plugin. Everything put together and then be easy to install in iOS, Android, or the other platforms that we have. What I also got was, can I connect multiple SDKs? I think that means multiple SDKs if you have a single project on Applanga, so that as Aisha has shown, there was this Android example project. You could also have a scenario where you would have one project and then you have an iOS SDK and Android SDK and both point to the same project. Generally, might be an idea to have like one project for iOS, one project for Android if you use the SDK, but it's technically possible. There are different setup, different considerations of when you want to have a single project on Applanga, when you want to have a specific one. Then we heard like how can I disable the draft mode? I think there are 2 points to make that. Like disable the draft mode is the same way, like you kind of log out of the draft mode the same way you log in. As Aisha has shown, you press the 4 fingers on the screen, it starts, you put in your credentials to log in. You also do it the same way that you press the 4 fingers on the screen and then you kind of log out again. You could go back to the regular production mode where it does not retrieve the draft values, but the regular target values. But more generally, maybe the question was in the direction of making it not show up when you press 4 fingers, maybe. And that's also something that you can configure either in the project settings where you can completely disable the draft mode, or also in the SDK itself, there are some configurations where you can switch off, for example, the draft mode. Some people have their certain environment flags where they then only allow that the draft mode is enabled only in the dev builds or something like that. So there are different ways of how you can make use of it and make sure users do not see it. You can also even set another gesture than the 4 finger one, like if they have any other kind of input that you would like to take to enable that. And then I think that covers it. Yeah, and then there was what happens if I have new content, like new text that is not yet released on the platform on Applanga, and then it is pushed. Will that be pushed to the SDK? So yes, that will happen. Everything that you publish on Applanga will also be downloaded by the SDK, but it really is not such a big deal, even if you have strings from features that are not yet released, since the app does not utilize them yet. So the users will not see them if the app feature is not live yet. The strings can live inside the app and it will not be exposed to the user. So there's no kind of leak of a feature or something like that. If you just have the strings, as long as the app does not utilize them, they will not be shown to the users. And I think that has covered them. Yes, that were all the questions that you sent to me through the chat. If you have anything else, we have a couple of minutes left now. We always kind of plan this out to end a little before the time. So you have some moments now to consider. If you have a question, we will just leave the channel open until everybody might be left. Anything that you might have find interesting that you saw today, it's also available on our website. Like there's documentation of all the SDKs, there's example cases, as well as the demo app that Aisha has shown in the videos. That's also on our GitHub account that you also find by going to the website and through the integration pages, but also just directly on GitHub, look for Applanga, and then you see the iOS example app, the Android example app that also includes the automated tests and all the kind of edge cases and all the kind of use cases the Applanga SDK can cover. We try to build one example of each into the demo application. So like pluralization and web views and what all have you in different apps. There should be an example for each of those cases in these apps, but also, as I just shown, like a little demonstration end-to-end, integrate and upload and screenshot draft mode. It's all be possible with that. Yeah, then I would like to say thank you from my side.
Thanks, Christian. Thanks everyone for their time today on our SDK webinar. We're getting into the new year, but we're hoping to continue to regularly produce webinars for users. So please be on the lookout for another invite in the next couple of weeks. We're going to stay on WebEx for a little while in case you guys have any other questions, but if later in today you have more questions, you can always contact us via our website support chat, or you can also email us directly at support@applanga.com.